Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
That's why I'll talk to people like you, because I want people to hear from other people who have made smart decisions in business, not just to boost your ego, but, I identify people that I believe have some of the answers. And that's why I pinged you, sent you an email after the last episode, and I said, hey, let's talk about employees, because you've got experience there that I don't have.
I do. Well, I don't know what your experience is, but I definitely have experience with employees. Good experiences and bad.
I have experience with employees, but I have one employee.
Yeah. And quite often one employee is the best employee. From what I've seen in most businesses and in our business, the first employee you generally hire is someone that's known to you, either through a family or a friend, and a friend of a friend, or a family member that's related to a friend. It's really once you start crossing past that 4 and 5 that you start having to look outside of the circle that's immediately around you, and that's when you're hiring unknowns and having to deal with, probations and humans. So I've probably got some insight.
Well, I think I want to dive into this topic deep. So let's introduce you back to the dungeon again. So welcome, Clint Adams.
Thank you.
It's the dungeon hasn't changed much since last time you were here, but you're not blind this time. I haven't got the blindfold on. We can see. We're sharing it on YouTube.
Yeah, I only heard the dungeon. So,
yeah, it's an interesting experience when all you can do is use your ears.
I don't mind it. I just think that I'm glad that you've gone video as well. I think it's probably going to give you a lot more reach for the podcast.
Yeah, that's my goal as well, is to make sure that there's people out there who say they don't want to listen on the podcast platforms, but if they can use their YouTube account to watch it, then they're going to follow along.
Well, you're recording the content anyway, so you might as well get another platform, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's not hard to record video when you're sitting in a dungeon like this. I've tried doing a little bit out on the road, and it gets a little bit harder.
Yeah, cameras in cars, etc. Obviously, I've got a team, so it's a bit easier for me. I just kind of say we're doing a podcast, and they just rock up with their suitcases and briefcases, and off we go. But I've been recording in my car for a couple of years, and you're not running from mains power, so you've got battery issues, and it becomes a bit more challenging.
Yeah, and I did a road trip a couple of weeks ago and did a little bit of footage out on site. So you've got the wind noise in the background, the birds, the mowers, and all the bits and pieces to deal with, and there's distractions. And it's nice to be out there for the visuals for YouTube. It's great. But to get good quality content while you're out on the road is another issue.
Especially on your own. I think if you've got a team working with you, you can catch the audio and potentially have some B-roll, and then have the audio cut with the B-roll. Makes it a bit more engaging to watch. But I guess until you've got a podcast that's covering its own costs.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I tried to do that. I went around whilst my other person I was interviewing was there. I went around and did a little bit of footage while he was doing something else, and then I've got that to put back together with the rest of it with the interview and give it some interesting backgrounds. But single person team, it's completely different.
I've never had to do it.
I just want to try and play. Yeah, fair. I want to try and play something here and see if it'll work. See if it'll come through. I've got the mic that plugged back in through the system, so it should hopefully work. I've got this on my phone.
And then go back to the other customer that's maybe not paying you well and send them a 30 days or a 90-day notice saying, as at June 30, due to the cost of increase, the cost of living and whatever else, we're putting up all our prices. This could be the only person that gets this letter. Your new price for the same service will be $69 instead of $58, and they'll be like, I'm not paying that. I'm like, look, I really appreciate that. I understand that it's not not for everyone, and we're happy. We want to terminate the contract now. And then all of a sudden, you start upgrading your customers, and it'll become an addiction.
That's me talking about firing customers.
Yes, that's right. So I was back listening to that yesterday and today, just getting ideas for what we talk about today to piggyback on the main topic I want to talk about with employees. And we were talking in depth about making sure you fire customers that are your B-roll or your crappy customers.
Yep.
And
Look,
then
we would probably say
improving
customers whose values aren't in line with ours. It's probably the polite way of saying it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
there was a couple of things I found in there, and that was from our previous interview. So it was along those lines. I'm going, that's the sort of thing which was probably the highlight of that interview. Going, let's look at how to make your business more profitable by improving the quality of your customers. So drop the customers that are low quality or offer them the opportunity to become high quality customers.
Yep. Especially if you're a business that has a limit to the amount of work you can do. Obviously, if you're a contractor and you're charging labor rate or labor, there's only a certain number of I guess profitable hours a day. If you're wasting them on bad customers and you've only got 40 hours a week in which to do that work, it wouldn't make sense to only work for good people, right? It's not like a McDonald's or a Woolworths where you kind of just take everyone that comes in and have no regard for the safety or the personal mental health or well-being of your staff, because it's just a numbers game. Whereas I think for your watchers and listeners, they're more likely to be optimizing for happiness and a reduction of stress rather than optimizing for volume.
Yeah, so this raises a really interesting point, piggybacking off the idea of trying to improve your business, improve your profitability of your business. Most people will start out in a lawn care business, which is service industry, and it is maintenance side of the landscaping businesses. So it's purely about maintaining a landscape or a lawn or whatever the simplest form is, through to some more complex ones. When they start with a vision of what's their happiness in a job versus what's their happiness if they own the job. And then after 6 months, particularly if it's the growth season, they're like, oh, if there's more work out there than I can keep up with, let me get a helper or an offsider. They don't call them an employee. So the growth initially is, can I capture more work than I can do? Well, then I should do that. And I did this. I made this mistake, so I own it. I got to that point where I had an employee, and then I've gone, when I pay the employee $20 an hour, this is 14 years ago, pay them $20 an hour and pay the expenses, and I was charging out at about $50 an hour for a job, there wasn't any money left over to pay them their $20 an hour and me to have money left over from that job. It was a loss.
Yep.
And most people will do that. They'll go, oh, yeah, I'm too busy. And what they've factored into their profit margin is purely their wage. So then they go, well, if $50 an hour is a good rate of pay, but I've got to pay some expenses out of that, I'm not too worried, not focusing so much on what my wage would be for that job until I've got to put on an employee. And then I start going, oh, I've got to pay an employee $20 an hour. I've got to pay some other expenses. So I'm getting at, most people shrink the business again instead of employing.
As in, rather than hiring another staff member, they'll just try and reduce their total
their
required work hours so that they're not overstressed.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's it. Yeah, so I've found a medium where I've got one employee or I've got a couple of casuals I can call on so that I can manage a workload that's higher than what I can do on my own. But this is where a lot of people will stumble and they'll go, well, I'll go back to what I can manage on my own and that's enough. And that way I don't have to worry about anybody else. I don't have to stress about somebody else. That's easy. But you started business a long time ago. And you've reached a point in your business where you've got a lot of employees.
Yeah, I think the peak at the end of last year we had 50. So across 3 different companies, across 4 different locations. I think that whatever someone chooses to do in their business really needs to be tied to the ultimate goal. And I think, I've got this book in my head of, I guess, a business book, and I've done one keynote around sales, which kind of all ties together with what I'm about to say. But you might want no employees because it makes life less complicated for you, and you don't want to deal with human resources, and you don't want to deal with work cover, and you don't want to deal with emotions and people's dogs getting pregnant and cars breaking down and whatever bullshit comes with actually having employees work for you. But other people might want to optimize for, I don't want to work on site. They might be getting to an age where they're not physically able to do as much work as they were before. So then they want to hire 3 or 4 staff and actually have 2 crews doing whatever. I think ultimately the gap that's happening between, well, firstly, I don't think anyone really truly articulates what they want out of their business. Like when I asked you, what do you want from this podcast? Like, you want to help people, or you want more? Why do you want more listeners? I don't think people are thinking about that. And I think if, as a contractor, the answer is, well, I want to earn this much money, or I want to only work this many days a week, or I want a combination of the two, I think then the next step is to go, well, how do we map that out and go, well, this is how much money I need to make, assuming that an employee gets paid for 8 hours a day, but they only do 6 hours of productive work. How much? Like, this is the stuff that you kind of touched on before, where you're paying someone $20 an hour and you're charging 50, but you're not thinking about the 2 hours a day where they're driving to jobs and they're not getting paid. And I think if you start, if people listening have a desire to kind of meet any one of those goals, I think the next step is to work out what that looks like map that out and go, well, this means, if I can make $10 per hour profit on the 8 hours a day that they're working, it covers that, and then this covers that, and then there's fuel and whatever else. And then they just set some rules. And I haven't really mapped it out fully in my head, but it's pretty much work out what the goal is and then map out what that looks like, set some rules about how you get engaged with as a business, and then stick to the rules. And the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. I mean, especially if the business is only small. Like, if you're talking about people that are kind of having to turn work down, once you set some rules, the work, I guess that all those pieces kind of fall into place. Well, they should anyway.
Yeah, they should. And there are people who do that and they do it really well. And then there's other people like myself who have gone at it and had a go and then gone, oh, that didn't work. I'll pull back and just work on my own, rather than trying to get those rules sorted out, work out how to have an employee and still be profitable. And
that's fine. Like, if that's what they want to do, I think sometimes, sadly, that person hasn't tried. Like, they failed in what they were trying to achieve from a lack of planning, and then didn't go, well, hey, maybe I didn't plan properly. They just went, oh, it doesn't work. And so they just give up and go, oh, well, I'm just going to have no staff. None of it's right or wrong, right? Like, everyone's kind of running their own race. I think the advice I'm giving is really for people that want a certain thing. Not people that are kind of just. People that are content with what they're doing probably aren't going to be listening to this podcast looking for advice anyway, right?
True. I think the audience will have people who are already in business, and some of them have tackled these questions well, but a lot of people that listen to a podcast like this are going to be asking this question, or they haven't asked the question yet, and this will prompt them to ask the question.
Because the other thing I was thinking of when you were saying about that you're charging $50, who dictates that $50, right? Like, is that a market-driven thing that you're just going, well, everyone else charges that, so that's what we're going to charge? I think that's probably a bad way of doing it, unless you're selling petrol.
If you look at the industry over the last 14 years, it has been driven by what other people are charging. And I think the positive that's come from that approach is that as the community has grown, and there's a definite supportive community in Australia now that helps to get those prices right, and it is based on what other people are charging. But one of the key figures there is Jim Penman, Jim's Mowing.
Yep.
And other people have brought themselves up to that bar and gone, oh, Jim's Mowing's charging about $80 per hour at the moment, so we want to match that.
And yet they don't know why. And I think that the issue is, I would I would like to see, and it doesn't look. This doesn't affect my life in any way, right? I don't have a contracting business. This is just one man's opinion on how I think it should be run. But I would be looking at it and going, well, if they're charging $80 per hour, what's that? How does that get split up? So for our business, we're an inventory-based business, so we buy stuff and we sell stuff. I know the split between my percentage of wages, my percentage of rent, my percentage of insurance, my percentage of cost of materials, all that, right? I think the $80 an hour, if they can. I think saying Jim charges 80, so we should charge 80 is a vastly different sentence from Jim charges 80 and I've ran all my numbers through that and we can charge 82 and make 10% net profit or 15% net profit or whatever the financial goal is for the business. It might be even more than that. Or they go, Jim charges 80. That's great for Jim. I think that we're a more boutique offering or a more specialist offering. My team have horticultural experience that is worth more. I pay them this much amount.
Yeah.
I pay them this much. This is how much work they get done per day. This is our costs. This is how much money I want at the end of the month or the year or the week. So we're going to charge $88 plus GST. I think that's probably. I don't think enough of that's happening, and I really think it's because there's a lack of education around finance and business in our education system. And so it's really left for people to just kind of blindly navigate. And sometimes they look back 5 years and they're going, oh, shit, I probably should have charged more money.
Yes, definitely. And for me, it's been a learning experience. Over that 14 years I've been in business, I've learnt to start looking for the right numbers to analyse them and go, okay, what's my profit margin? Is there a profit margin there, or is it just that I'm drawing a wage? And, yeah, I've looked at you would have heard of Profit First?
Yeah, yep. Mike Michalowicz's book before that, which was The Pumpkin Plan. The Pumpkin Plan was a better book for me. I really enjoyed that, and that was the Pumpkin Plan was really where the 12 immutable laws that we operate under came from, which is where the no dicks allowed, which is where this conversation started. That's all driven from that book. So yeah, there's a good recommendation for anyone. Listen to those two books or read them if you're a paperback man or woman.
Yes. Everybody does audiobooks these days, I'm sure.
Especially the world you live in, right? Like most of those guys and girls have headphones on, 8 to 10 hours a day, or they're in a car and they're doing work. And if they're a sole trader, their best friend is what they're listening to, because they can't watch anything while they're mowing.
Well, they listen to me, and they like it when I do interviews that are 3 hours long, because that helps to get through more of the day.
That gives them a third of their day covered. Yeah. Well, maybe.
But then they've got the rest of the week.
Yeah. Well, that's right, and that's where Audible comes in.
That's it.
And look, these guys know where to find good podcasts. There's there's a bunch of it, but I think, and that's one of the beautiful things about you doing this, is that you might give them access to my podcast, and then 10 of your audience might like my views on things and they go listen to my podcast. Or you might do a podcast with, say, Jim. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I didn't know Jim had his own podcast. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know that the accountant had his own podcast. And then all of a sudden they've got this bank of 8 hours a day of audio education or entertainment, which is going to help get them through that day.
Yep. Well, the fact that I like your podcast means that my listeners, a percentage of them, will like it as well.
0 is a percent, remember. Hopefully. Look, I'm not. No. I do podcasts for the same reason you do. I think with an added sprinkle of I have a bit of an ego, but I genuinely want to help people, and I think that if I can shortcut people's learnings around business, I've got nothing to hide. Like, we're very public about our turnover and our pain points, and things that we're struggling with. I'm a bit of an open book. Probably partially connected to that sentence I said before about there being a lack of education in the education system around personal finance, and I'm actually playing with some ideas now to create education for my team internally around budgeting and savings and interaction with banks and insurance companies, and things that I take for granted. But a lot of the younger, I've got a lot of people in their early 20s working with me. They haven't had to cross these bridges yet. So, and you think about those business owners that you'd be talking to that are in their 40s that probably haven't navigated some of the things that are just some people considered standard practice, right?
Yeah. Well, see, within the Facebook group LMCA, which is for contractors in Australia,
Yep.
questions will come up about how much do you charge all the time. And some people have been in the group for 5-6 years and going, this is a stupid question, stop asking it. And other people are like, well, I've been here just as long as you. And the more people that ask this, the more times I'm going to help answer it so that we help people get these things right.
Well, it
and
seems
so
like a smooth way of colluding.
Support spirit. Yeah. Well, that community support has made it possible for people to succeed rather than fail.
Yep.
And that's made a big difference for independent people. Gyms mowing contractors get that support internally. We go to an independent group to get it.
Yeah, but and they're probably...
What I see, people...
Go, sorry.
Yeah, what I see, even within that group, is that people can get a decent pay for working on their own, but when it comes to getting employees and having success with employees, they still stumble and they don't get that right. And I think what you're saying, the system of making sure the numbers make sense so the employee's valuable is a strong part of that. And then having the understanding of how to train an employee, how to look after them, how to make them want to stay working for you, all those aspects come into it as well.
Well, the challenge that the people that you're talking about have more than a lot of other industries is that the barrier to entry to start a business that does garden and lawn maintenance is pretty low. You know, the tool and equipment costs are pretty low, and there's no national recognised accreditation or minimum requirement. There's no, like an architect needs to have a certain level of, they need to be an architect, registered architect, accountant needs to have their accounting requirements, doctors have to have requirements. The barrier to entry for lawn mowing and garden maintenance contracting is pretty much, if you can get together the right tools and, you can start doing work tomorrow. And we see this in the landscape industry a lot. And, it's the worst has been in the last couple of years, really off the back of the amount of money that the government pushed into the construction or into all industries, but obviously the construction and maintenance industries were part of that there was so much work and there was so much money because there'd been so much payroll relief that everyone got paid more and more and more and more and more, that they become, I guess it's all out of balance at the moment, and business owners are paying staff so much money that they're not getting enough profit back from that. And I'm going in a different direction at the moment, but this should come back to where it makes sense. That there's you've got there's this tug of war between clients that are like, how can you charge that much? You've got staff that are saying, I need to get paid more, and if I don't, I'm going to leave and start my own business. It's quite an interesting place, and the business owners that I see that do it the best are the ones that take care of all the things that you've just talked about. So good onboarding and training, good support, good team environment, kind of having the team come along for the journey. I don't think it's always money, and it can't always be money, right? Because, people are always, if someone comes over for $1, they're going to leave for $1. I think it really needs to come down to...
Well, let's talk about that dollar rate for a second, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I think talking to a couple of people this week, I've asked that question. One person works for a pest control company, and I said, what do you think I should be paying an employee to keep them so that they want to stay working for me? And he said $40 an hour minimum.
Casual or full-time?
Full-time.
Yep.
I think he was very biased because he's an employee working for a company. So it's the employee's perspective, right?
Yeah. I understand. Look, this is something that's very fresh in my mind. I've been looking at my employees' wages today. I've been talking to a lot of business owners about the moves, people's expectations. I feel like $40 is probably the new $32 or the new $34 in the landscape construction and garden maintenance and mowing industry. I feel like, $40 an hour is effectively $80,000 a year. The federal minimum wage for retail level one's kind of in the $47,000 to $50,000 bracket. I'm finding that you can't pay a minimum wage, and you can't even get minimum level expectations for minimum wage anymore. And I think inflation's got to a point where inflation's out of whack. And the whole purpose of inflation is to stem spending and to slow spending, and for people to stop going out and buying discretionary things that they probably don't need, things that they want, to try and slow the rate of inflation. The problem is, at the moment, and this could be a generational thing with the generation below me, is that when things start costing more money, people just walk into their boss and say, I need more money. And the boss goes, why do you need more money? I don't understand. You're not bringing any more value to the business. And they're like, because beer's more expensive and the movies are more expensive and interest rates have gone up and I need all this shit. When you don't, and traditionally that would slow spending, right? And so people would go, okay, so maybe I don't need to go out and get drunk this weekend, and maybe I'll stay home and maybe I'll make my own lunches, and then everything kind of contracts and then it slows down. That it's just not happening. And I genuinely believe there's a cliff that we're going to go over at some point soon, which could be global. And I don't know if Australia will get impacted as badly as the rest of the world, but there is some crazy things going on in the world. It depends what you follow and what you listen to, but there's so much global debt, and then there's all this, everyone wants more, and it's going to get to a point where everyone that's gone chasing that $40 an hour, I really hope that they've chosen a good leader, because what will happen is everyone's picking off these $40 an hour people, and then at some point the brakes are going to get ripped on, the handbrake's going to come up, and they're going to say, we need to make 4 or 8 of these staff redundant. And they're going to have the pick of the litter, but they're also probably going to keep the ones that have been with them the longest, or the ones that are less likely to have mercenary style behavior. And those people are now going to be looking around for jobs that don't exist anymore because the economy isn't there. So
yeah,
there's videos of me talking.
Throw a couple of other numbers in there for you.
Yep.
So this conversation that I had was initially $40 an hour is what's needed for a full-time employee to stay working in a fairly labor-intensive job.
Yep.
And then on the back of that number, another number was put in there that the minimum rate that people are getting paid at the moment in labor-intensive work is $23 an hour.
That would be the federal minimum wage for some kind of work, full-time.
And he said, that's criminal. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty hard to live off $23 an hour, but in this situation, that's what people are getting paid, and there's a lot of people that are willing to do it. So there's a lot of people out there in Australia right now that are willing to work.
The funny thing is, it's easy to say that's criminal, but the reason that the person needs $40 an hour is because they're getting $40 an hour, right? So they put the minimum wage up. Business owners are not going to eat the shit that comes from that. They're going to say, say McDonald's, right? Minimum wage goes up for people that work at McDonald's. Cool. Guess what McDonald's do? Big Mac just went up $1, right? They're not gonna take that. So the reason why, and that's this cycle, right? So the reason why this person needs $40 an hour is because the wages have got to $40 an hour. It's unfortunate for people that earn 23, but they're probably just not buying Big Macs. They're probably going to the shop and getting a 10-kilo bag of rice and living a modest life. Most humans are going to try and make as much money as they can, depending on their happiness factor as well. Because obviously there's a filter to look through as to whether or not you're enjoying where you're working. You've got good culture, you've got good support, flexibility, hours, that kind of thing. But, if you can get more money, you're going to get more money because you can buy more stuff and you can do more things. You can save more money. You can create a better life. But the people, this $40 an hour, eventually that'll be criminal, right? It's called inflation. And then he'll be like, well, it's not 40 anymore. It's 50. And then it's 60. And then it's 70. And it doesn't stop because discretionary spending is out of control and debt.
So those two numbers are at the extremes, right? Like 23 is probably on the low side for a labor-intensive job.
For an adult, for someone over 21,
and people are willing to do it.
It's as low as you'd legally be able to go. That's why that number would be. It would be the minimum.
Whereas $40 an hour is well and truly on the high side for that job, unless you've got, like you say, good skills to back it up.
Or the conditions are shit. So if you're working away from home, or you're doing long shifts, or you're working in dangerous situations, It would go higher than that.
Yeah.
You go to union sites in Melbourne, New South Wales, and Victoria. It could be 53. It could be 68, depending on how high up you are.
So I would say that the industry average at the moment is around $30 an hour, or between 30 and 35.
Yeah, which is kind of between 60 and 70. And I think that, as in $1,000 per annum, I feel like I was saying before, 30 to 35 is the new 25. I remember, I don't know, 15 years ago, people wanted 25 an hour. People wanted $1,000 a week before tax, or 52 grand a year kind of thing. And now that number's 70, right?
Yep.
And in 2 years, it's probably 90. And so these six-figure incomes that people have been talking about for the last 15 years, everyone will have one soon. But it also costs $2.4 million to buy a piece of shit 3-bedroom house in a suburb no one wants to live in. Like, they're just numbers, right? I think it really needs to be what can you do with that matters. Like, what does $40 an hour buy you today?
Going back to what you were saying before about the economy can't continue this way, I know, you and I are in the same generation. We're not quite the same age, but we're in the same generation. If you look at my grandparents, and say even in between grandparents and parents, you got people who went through World War I, World War II.
Yep.
They come out the back of the war.
My grandfather did both. Yep.
They would cook soup. It would be a vegetable stew or soup, and they would have a slice of bread there that they would mop up the leftovers with to make sure they didn't waste one morsel of that soup, and then they would eat the bread.
Yep.
And we're sitting there complaining about our Maccas and our not just our takeaway food, but how many restaurants we go to in 1 week and how many cafes we go to on the weekend.
Yep.
So exactly what you're saying, the economy is at that point where we're not living in the depression that is comparable to that stage that our parents and grandparents went through.
Well, look, and the thing is, people are going to try and make the most of all situations, right? But everything works well when it's in balance and when it's in harmony. And there's probably people that would think there's too many millionaires is not really a big deal anymore, because $1 million isn't what it was 10 or 15 years ago. But there's probably too many 100 millionaires or decamillionaires, and there's too many billionaires, and there's not enough people earning $40 an hour or $35 an hour. It does feel a little bit out of whack, and I don't really know how. Obviously, the alternative to what's happening now is we kind of go into a different financial model, which is non-capitalistic and non-democratic, which I'm not a supporter of. I like how it works. I just think that there's some mechanisms that are used to try and stem inflation that probably either aren't working well enough, especially in the US, or there's something on the balance sheet that shouldn't be there. And I won't go too much into it because it's probably not for your audience, but the amount of money that's being printed in the US and given to other countries has to come from somewhere. And, if we have small versions of that happening here, that's why people need $40 an hour, because of the amount of tax that's in fuel, or the amount of tax that's in cigarettes, or the amount of tax that's in alcohol. And, it's...
Yeah. Well, how long ago do you think millionaires were actually considered a status worth achieving?
In my mind, like 1990. I think.
So the first place that I can see it actually having a worthy status, Great Gatsby, 1920s.
Sorry, I thought what was the last time that it meant something. The first time I wouldn't know. I just remember growing up, and I was born in 82, and my mum's second husband was in finance, so we'd talk a lot about. So I would have been 8 or 9 when they were together. We talked a lot about the share market, and $1 million was substantial back then. It was a lot of money, and now a large number of people's homes are worth more than $1 million. And I feel like $10 million is now like what $1 million was back then. But again, it comes down to what that does for you, because the number is just a number, right? Like we could all earn $400,000 an hour. We've become Venezuela, and our currency is so devalued that you've just got these blocks of paper for every hour that you do. But it's what it equates to. Like, does it buy you a house? Does your annual salary buy you a house every 5 years, or does your annual salary buy you enough gold to buy an eighth of a house every year, or whatever. It depends on how you look at things, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
that's extremely relevant. That how much does your salary buy you each year is really important. But if we go back to those two extreme numbers for an employee, so $23 an hour versus $40 an hour, go in the middle somewhere. But I can find an employee that's willing to work for $23 an hour. I know this is true because I know people who are doing that. They're working for $23 an hour.
I can find employees that are willing to work for $15 an hour. I'm just not legally allowed to pay them that. That's the crazy thing, right?
Yeah,
and that's a very American model.
I give my 15-year-old daughter. She just turned 15, so I'm going to have to put the pay rate up. But I gave her work every now and then. She'd come work with me for $10 an hour.
Yeah, but
you know she's 15 now. It's got to go up.
It's not just about. I think that there'll be people that move to Australia for a better life, and we've got two. A Mexican couple working for us at Lawn Hub that have come to Australia on visas to try and create a life that's different to what they were living, and they just want to work. They don't give a shit about federal minimum wages, and obviously we have to pay them a certain amount, and they can only work a certain number of hours because that's the laws of our country. But I guarantee you, if they were able to work 60 or 80 hours a week for $15 or $20 an hour, they would, because they're not like they went to Melbourne last week from Adelaide for a meeting about their visa. They caught a bus, right? You think about the amount of people that they'd be like, a bus? I'm not catching a bus. I'm going to fly in economy X and get my leg room. Like, it's just, and it's comparable to what you were talking about with the bread and the soup. That's fine, and I'm not like I'm an indulgent human being, right? I love flying business class. I've got a car that 6.4 litre petrol engine. Like, I don't. But I also work for that. I think that just the reality is, if there's too many people in an economy wanting more without giving something back to the economy, because I provide value to the economy in my mind, then the maths doesn't work out. And then all of a sudden it has to come from somewhere. And I think that I actually almost welcome a recession in some capacity, because I think that there's too many people out there doing better than their skill set, and the rising tide raises all ships. And all these people that are like, I'm worth $40 an hour. You're like, why? Well, because my friend who can spell the same number of words that I spell and can run as fast as I can gets paid $40 an hour. It's like that. It's not relevant. Like, and it really should come back to the value that the person brings to the business. And I think if we take this back to trying to provide value for your audience, if you want $40 an hour and you're on 32, what does that conversation look like with your boss, right? Like, how can you bring enough value to that business that they can afford to pay you $8 more an hour, and then they're making another $10 an hour as well because you're faster, or you're more efficient, or you're upselling gutter cleaning while you're there, or whatever it might be. I don't think it's probably valuable for us to spend too much time on how screwed our economy is. I don't know if it's going to bring anyone any value. But
yeah, well, I think it's interesting because most of the listeners are going to be looking at, if I put on an employee, what's the things that will keep them happy? And getting the wage right's really important. But I think the take-home message from this is you can pay them $23 an hour, or you can pay them $40 an hour. In that bracket somewhere, you find a happy medium where that wage is helping them to see value in the job and helping you to get value in the business.
And the thing I struggle with is you've got a group of people that get paid minimum wage and aren't even good enough to get paid that. And we see that sometimes where they don't even cover the minimum requirements to get paid minimum wage. But by law in Australia, we have to pay them that amount of money, and that's a challenge. And then there's a group of people that are probably in the middle, and they're probably the 28 to 32 or the 26 to $32 an hour people that you're talking about, that in their minds probably don't think they're getting paid enough, and in their bosses' minds they're probably getting paid too much, and they could argue either way on any day. And then you get the next level above that are kind of in that 36 or whatever number I said before, above 40, who are they're the hunters, and they're bringing home the meat for the business. And I guess it depends, as an employee, where do you want to fit in there? And are you even aware of where you fit? Because I think so many employees think that they're worth more, like the person that you spoke about that was worth $40 an hour. I'd be interested to know why they believe that's, because the way you said it was like, well, what did he say? It's criminal to pay any less than that. Why? Like, what, is it because you think you should get paid that, or because you're bringing that much value times two? Because when we look at it, like we've got a service-based part of our business, which is irrigation design. I'm looking for 3 to 4x return on investment on their wage, right? So if they want $40 an hour, I need to charge them out at $160 an hour.
So, and that's a number which I have talked about before too. Is the wage you pay for an employee, you should be doing 3 times that as your charge out rate.
You are a service business, as in you give that service. You're not charging for it, but then the consumer pays more.
That's
and then
comparable.
It all goes up, right? Like, you know, if you want to pay your staff $40 an hour, then you have to charge your lawn mowing services out at $120 an hour, right? Maybe you can.
Yeah.
I think
people
if
do.
I think if you're smart and you work in, you know, one suburb and you do one, like, and I don't know if we talked about this last time, but and I don't know if you've spoken to him. There's a guy called Trusted Garden who's in South Australia, and he pretty much only works in one suburb, and it's him and a +1 or a +2, but it was pretty much just him. And he worked out a way to work. Yeah, he's talked about it publicly, I'm pretty sure, but it's either 3 or 4 days a week, 8 hours a day, and makes $5,000 a week or something. Like, because he's not traveling, right? He's just going house to house to house to house to house, and he's charging. He doesn't charge per hour; he charges per job, and that might work backwards to $120 or $160 an hour, right? I think new businesses especially can get caught up chasing glory jobs like, you know, Parliament House or whatever, and they're like, oh, we just have to win this one, and because it looks good on our resume, but you're driving an hour each way to do it, and you have to pay for dumping, which you haven't allowed for, and whatever else. So
I get a lot of questions about how to get big commercial contracts because people see it like that. They're like, oh, the bigger commercial contract is the way to go, and it's like, well, yeah, I agree, that is good. But like you're saying, if you do a lot of residential jobs that have got good route density so that you're not spending a lot of time traveling between jobs, that also gives you really good value for money. And
I think the big commercial jobs make sense if you're doing 40 of them a week and that's all you do, right? Yeah. Just big commercial jobs. Then that your crew understand how to manage them. You know, you've got all the tools and equipment for it, and it's what you do.
Yeah. But yeah, for the low barrier to entry startup, the residential jobs are much easier to acquire and much easier to get that route density down so that you can be quite profitable with a lot of small jobs.
You'll also find there'll be cash flow improvements because there's a higher likelihood of someone leaving you $100 in an envelope for your the work that you've done at their house for the fortnight, rather than sending a bill through to a body corporate for $1,200 a month for whatever it is, because it has to get signed off by someone in some department, and it doesn't get paid till it gets done. And then, you know, your purchase order didn't, like, there's so many ways of them navigating not paying you.
True. Very true. And it depends who you deal with, because I've found real estates are probably the most difficult to deal with in that. The body corporates and the real estates are the most challenging ones getting the money out of.
Easy clip.
Yes.
Real estate agents are just car salespeople that they just fed a bit more when they were younger. But yeah,
I was talking to somebody else just before you, and they were saying exactly the same thing. Real estate agents are like used car salesmen.
Yeah, that just stayed at school for an extra month. I've got friends who are real estate agents and car salespeople, and a friend of mine who owns car yards, and I'm like with probably 300 car salespeople working for him. And I know that one person is definitely not an example of all, and that it's very unfair to tar people all with the same brush. But it's a unique field where it's quite. I think a lot of them would openly be like, "Yeah, no, we're pretty bad." The techniques that are employed, and I think the internet is probably going to make that less likely. I pray, and I'm not a religious man, but I look forward to the day where the real estate agents, where it all collapses, and that the internet becomes the middleman, and that basically there's a peer-to-peer real estate. Because I think there's still this final fear of people going, well, if I don't use an agent, like how is it justifiable that you charge $40,000 or $50,000 to sell a house? You put an ad on a platform that you don't own, pay $1,200, and 40 people rock up and fight about it, and then they get it's just ridiculous. Like, there's no way that it's out of whack. It's like, I was saying before, like our financial system's out of whack. The amount of money that real estate agents get for selling a house is way out of whack. And my friends who are real estate agents are going to hate me saying that, but I just think that it's out of whack. Anyway,
I agree. It's true.
Do you want to leave your job to create a profitable and enjoyable lawn and garden business? Aussie Lawn Stars shares the stories, lessons and advice to help you grow a healthy, productive, efficient and sustainable business. Do you want more or simply have a question about what you heard? Contact Aussie Lawn Stars at iCloud.com or look me up, Gary Ashton, on Facebook and Messenger for individual help. Business coaching helps you to have the right mindset and perspective when it comes to daily decision-making, planning, or knowing what to look for to improve your business. thinktankcoaching.com.au has helped me, and they can help you move towards your business goals. Visit their website or email them, thinktankcoaching@outlook.com. If you want to establish the best practices in bookkeeping, accounting and business structure, contact Adrian from Prosper Financial on 0249 773363. And you all need to head to Lawn Mowing Contractors Australia and the Australian Professional Lawn Contractors Facebook groups for supportive communities focused on our industry.
So if we go back to the whole employee issue of finding good employees, making sure you get them happy working for you, one of the biggest issues I've seen in my time is scarcity mindset. And I love using the word mindset because a lot of it comes down to how we look at it rather than what's actually
When you say
happening.
scarcity mindset, whose mindset's got scarcity? The employee or the employer?
So for me, the employer, going through COVID, there was a scarcity of good employees. So my mindset was focused on that scarcity of employees.
Yep.
So coming
there was
out
probably
of COVID,
there was no less employees. There was just more demand for work because the economy was off its head.
Well, and I guess that shifted where employees were willing to work too. So manual labour, less employees were willing to do manual labour when they could do an easier job somewhere else and get paid better.
Well, there was also the unfortunate circumstance that people could stay home and do nothing and get paid. And, it really exposed the people that were non-productive members of society. And the ones that were like, as soon as they saw a crack in the fabric of society, went, oh, I'm going to do a COVID test and I get 2 weeks off and I'm going to take another 2 weeks here and I'm going to get government support and I'm going to pretend I need a job. And those people know who they are and they may come out the other side thinking that they got away with it. But society, and Adelaide's quite a unique town or a unique city where everyone knows everything and, the kind of people
Adelaide's like West Australia. It's a separate country almost.
Yeah, just without the douchebag premier, but I guess he's not there anymore, right? And he did what he thought was right for Western Australia, and I think that until you've been in that situation, I can't be too critical. WA's economy seems pretty good, so who am I to judge? But I think
I think all premiers going to come under fire for various different choices they make, and
being a leader during a pandemic or a war, you rarely come out the other side looking like you did great, right? Whatever. At the time of getting your seat, 47% of the people think you're an idiot, and then as you go through, then you kind of confirm that for some, and then others change. But I guess if we going back to the employee side of things, right? It's my belief that we're branding our business as an employer of choice for the world, right? And at the moment, we're trying to recruit for 3 positions, and we're having a bit of trouble. We haven't had too much interest. We've offered one job role. We've offered 2 people jobs, and they've turned them down. They've been offered more money to work in alternative positions, and some of them have had qualifications that supersede what we're hiring for. So they've been offered what they're worth in their normal market when we're trying to hire them to work for something lower than their pay grade. But
the fact that they've applied for your job would be an indication that they're considering it, though, right?
That's right. And
obviously they've gone for the other job, but
they've applied for 3 jobs and they've taken. It's funny. Everyone kind of goes we had 2 of them say, "Oh, I like the idea of working at WaterPro because of the diversity. You know, there's a bit of inside work, there's a bit of outside work. We're not in front of a computer all the time, and we're like, oh, beautiful, and then we offer them the
Yeah.
job, and then they go, I really don't want to be tied to a desk full time. And then you ring them and go, what have you decided? And they're like, oh, I'm going to take the other job. It's, you know, an extra whatever amount of money. And we're like, oh, I thought you said you didn't want to be tied to a desk. And it's funny what people say versus what they do, because everyone's like outraged, but then they're like, yeah, but it's an extra 20 grand a year. So I'd rather hate my life and get paid a little bit more. But
Yeah.
I think for your guys, it's about, you know, there's a company over here. You should probably talk to these guys actually. Called Adelaide Hills Lawns and Gardens. There's two directors, and they seem to have a very they don't seem to have any challenges around recruitment, and they might argue that, they might say that they do, and we just don't see it publicly. But they would be pushing 50 plus staff doing commercial contracting, and like I said, lawn mowing, garden maintenance, and they've also got an irrigation division and now a landscape construction division. But the culture, it just appears that they're very forward-facing online around social media. So there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of highlighting their staff, what their staff do, the anniversaries of their staff, real simple stuff, celebrating birthdays, celebrating anniversaries, making their staff feel that each individual one of them is as important as the rest of the people inside the team. And, you know, I think if you're trying to make this cake of recruitment and you want everyone, you want to get the best possible employees, there's all these, you know, different parts that go into the cake. And one of them is obviously you have to pay a certain amount of money, right? Like if the market rate is 35, then you have to pay 35, 36. Doesn't mean you have to pay 40, but then you sprinkle in good corporate culture, and that can be whatever you see it as. It doesn't have to be pinball machines in the front office, or, you know, quarterly paintball sessions. It's whatever works for you and whatever it works for them. I think community involvement, they're based in the Adelaide Hills, so they've got a lot of community involvement, which I think is kind of a funnel for the football and cricket players that might be at the clubs that they're involved in, and they're bringing them in. And then the public acknowledgement, so the birth, like, you know, Johnny's been working here for 4 years, we're celebrating Sally's birthday, and then obviously I think the last piece being, you know, a clear pathway for progression in the business, if there is one, and the support and education that you might need to get that. And that the hard thing for the community that we're talking about now is if you're a lawn mowing contractor and you're looking to hire one person, what's their pathway? No progression. But the progression might be they own the business. So the person that's hired them might say, I'm going to retire in, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give you the business at the end of that 10 years based on the following, you know, expectations. I just think that if you're going to do that, if you're the employee that's getting offered that, you want something firm in writing around that, because I think it can be very easy to promise the world and then under-deliver because something happens. You know, that guy passes away and his partner said, no, that was never part of the deal. So I think if you can take all of, and that's not all of the answers, but I think if you were to try to take all of them and do an 8 out of 10 job on all of them, I think you're going to probably be in the top 10% of employers in your area, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a bunch of things you can do like that. You know, going back to what I was saying about the scarcity mindset, particularly coming out of COVID, there was definitely a scarcity of employees, which then creates this mindset with employers or small businesses wanting to grow. Yep. If you go over to the US, and they've gone through a labour crisis as well, but in the US, they could fairly easily find labour for minimum wage. So
there's
compared
20
to Australia,
odd million
sort of
illegal immigrants have moved into the US in the last 4 years. So there's plenty of labour workers available. Like almost the full population in Australia.
In the US, you can start a lawn care business, low barrier to entry business, and you can find employees to do the work for a fraction of the cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in the US 4 times last year, and we went and met with a contracting company, and we sat down with the guy running it, and he was talking about their hourly rate for their workers. It was somewhere around $10 or $12, and I think this was in Arizona, and they were pissed that it was about to go to 17 or something. And I laughed. And obviously, when you compare that to the Australian to US dollar, it's probably not vastly different, but yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely have a lower minimum wage, and they make it work. Maybe they supplement it with crime. I'm not saying all people do, but if people get too
Yeah.
close to the edge, and that's the other risk, right? From a society standpoint, if we don't pay, and this is why Australia is such a beautiful country. We have that, or part of why it's such a beautiful country. We have this federal minimum wage, which ensures that there's enough there, right? You don't have to go stealing from other people or breaking laws to have just enough, right? You don't have to steal bread. And I know that's a very extreme example, but there are countries where that people have to steal to eat, right?
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, you're saying scarcity mindset in America, not the same.
Yeah. So I think, looking at where we sit, if we want to grow our business, that's the situation we find ourselves in. And the challenges I have come across, and the challenges that people listening to this are going to come across, is how to give those employees, instead of $23 an hour, call it $27, $30 an hour. That's going to hit the mark. But then keep those employees invested in the business. And a recent interview I did, I compared this to buying a franchise rather than starting an independent business. So if you buy a franchise, you're invested in the business at a different level to if you're independent. And one of the reasons is because you've got that support network around you. So you apply the same thing with employees, and how do you make them invested in the business? How do you make them feel like they're part of a team? How do you make them feel like they've got that support network around them? Like, this is easy to be here, even though the pay rate's not $40 an hour.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. And the challenge will be that there's no like one size fits all for that, right? Like, it's going to be really dependent on the owner of the business and what's right for them. Because just like I touched on before, you've got businesses like Google and Facebook where high margin, you can really create I don't want to call it false culture, but like manufacture culture in a different way than a business owner might create culture. And not everyone has a personality that might be in line with creating positive culture, right? Like, some people might just be angry, and it makes it a bit harder to create that. And in an economy at the moment, I think our employees have more choices than like, it's an employees market at the moment, whereas during a depression it's an employers market. It's hard for people that don't have the positive culture, especially for I guess I saw an article this morning on Google or something, and it was like highlighting how a millennial manager sent a positive text message to one of his staff saying, hope what was it like? Hope you've recovered from laneway, like, let me know when this work's done. And it was just highlighting the way, I guess, a manager that's born in a certain generation might talk to an employee in a certain generation. And I kind of laughed at it and went, just, I don't even understand. Like, this feels like an ad for that company more than anything. But then, is that an expectation now? Like, is that part of what, if you want to pay someone $27 or $29 an hour instead of the 40 that they think they're worth, you can do that, but they have to be allowed to wear a hoodie, and like, you can't upset them. Like, you have to make sure that the toilet paper is like, the top shelf, and you don't want to ask them where they've been because you're micromanaging them. Like, I think the labour market needs a swift slap in the face, and I think the economy will do it. And I think for business owners at the moment, it's just about enduring some challenging times where, especially if you're good, right? Like, I think there will also be some businesses that slap in the face will actually push those businesses that were startups back into employment, because that's part of it, right? Like, you talked about the scarcity. There's if 20% of the lawn mowing contracting companies shut down and move back into employment, it just reshuffles again, and it kind of goes back to probably what it was when the balance was right around the number of businesses and employees was, there was more underneath than all layered next to each other.
Yep. Yeah. Well, something I raised before is talking about franchises. And I think if you look at the franchise model of McDonald's, you can see how even within a franchise model like that, where everything's cookie cutter, you can still have a great culture for employees or a terrible culture for employees. And I think of a local McDonald's here where the culture is such that the food coming out of that McDonald's has come under a lot of scrutiny.
Below the normal standard.
And the employees' behaviour outside of just what they make in the kitchen is also coming under scrutiny.
Yep. And that's either from the manager or the franchisee.
Well, yeah, I guess this is what I'm getting at. Typical McDonald's, you expect that the store managers, the employees in the store, they're all going to be at a level that matches with the way the training that McDonald's provides for a franchise works. So that you've got that good company culture. You've got people wanting to be the store manager. You've got people wanting to do more hours, and you've got people like employees working for the labour rate that McDonald's pays, willing to and wanting to stay there.
Traditionally, those businesses, and I worked at Domino's for 2 or 3 years out of high school, so that I'm familiar with that. Yep. And the franchisee owned, I think he was a McDonald's manager prior, so I'm across it all. And I think, that cake that I talked about before with progression and training and then a minimum wage and culture and all that, in the absence of potentially the wage, I think the culture, because I enjoyed working there, it was fun. The systems made it pretty hard to make a mistake. But the progression that they put in front of you, if you're a young delivery driver, burger maker, fry cooker, to move into a shift runner position, into an assistant manager position, into a store manager position, and potentially a franchisee. Domino's do a great job of this, and I'm not sure, it's been 20 years since I've seen the model, but I think that creates a certain culture that holds people there, because they're like, well, if I do the next step, then I will, with 6 more steps, I'll have my own store, and then I'll be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I think that if that's not, that McDonald's sounds like it's either the franchisees are delinquent, or it might be owned by McDonald's Australia. And I don't know what the model is, but usually the ones that are owned by head office, I'd say that, because they'll have someone come in and do mystery shopping. And if those stores don't meet minimums, they'll get penalised. So I'm surprised. And
it's interesting. You talk about the Domino's model there. My son is 20 years old. He'll be 21 in a couple of months. He's still working for Domino's, and most of what he does is delivery driver, but he's across it because he's been in there for 5 years. He's doing that part-time whilst he's doing an electrical apprenticeship. And the reason, like going back to what you're saying, it's easy for him to be there.
Yeah.
It's really easy for him to stay there.
And if he's got mental fatigue from doing other work, it's like, that's why it's probably good as a second job. Like if you're someone that's trying to get ahead and save and buy a house or pay your house off quicker, and you've been working at at a local council as a landscape architect all day, you've been making decisions and you're doing all this challenging mental work, you don't have the mental bandwidth to then go do another thing like that. So to be able to just get in the car, and obviously I had a street directory back then, so it was even more labor intensive. But so for anyone listening, that's Google Maps paper version. But I would go do deliveries, and it was just fun. You come back, everyone's talking shit, but you're on the clock. Like get in, get out, get in, get out. Like it's about saving time.
Yep.
Not by speeding and breaking the law, but by getting out onto the road quicker. But all you're doing is you're just driving somewhere, right? Which most people can, my mate can eat a burger, drive a manual, and smoke a durry all at the same time. So, if you can do that, it's pretty easy to do. So, and I think if your son was tasked with potentially moving into a different role that was maybe more mentally challenging, like he actually had to make decisions all night, it might be hard to do the apprenticeship and do that without being very fatigued, especially at 20. I think as much as you're young and fresh and you can go out and drink all night and be at work the next day, I think the mental muscle of making 100 really challenging decisions a day is something that you have to grow as you get older. You know what I mean? Like you become
Yeah.
you've got to do it all day at work, and then you've got to go home and do it all day at night, and one of your kids is having trouble with something at school, and like that muscle becomes stronger. So I think it's the perfect place. And I loved my time at Domino's, and if my kids came home and would just say that they were going to go work at McDonald's, any of the supermarkets, I would encourage it I think I talked about this with you last time, from a procedural understanding standpoint, and what I would hope is a safe and supportive environment. It wasn't when I worked at Woolworths, but that was a long time ago. So I think it would be different now.
Fair enough. I think that makes a big difference for Isaac, for my son. He finds the Domino's work is really easy for him to turn up and chill out. And, like you say, the delivery drivers, they get performance of some description that's attached to how quickly they get their deliveries done, but they're not allowed to speed.
Yeah, it's the idea is, and obviously Domino's would be the most technologically advanced pizza business in the world, I would say, based on what I've seen from the outside, because I still watch with interest because I used to work there. They would know what Google Maps would have suggested that the time should have been for him to get from the store to the place and back. And then there'd probably be KPIs attached to that, where it was a bit different back in my day. It was like, it was really the time in the store. They don't want you in the store. And it's a model I still use now we've got a landscape supplies business here. And, we've got trucks, which are even more dangerous. You've got 20-ton driving around. I don't want them speeding, and I don't want them breaking the law, but I don't want them kind of like pissing around and like getting out of the truck. So we'd be like, don't get out of the truck. We will bring you the delivery docket. We will load you. We will get you out of here. I think that's probably Domino's would have it dialed into the minute. And I guess if he's meeting those KPIs, then you get a new badge for your hat, which is really funny because, your mate, the person you referred to before that wants $40 an hour to spray, for pest control. It would be interesting to see if he would stay at a job that's $30 an hour, but he gets a new badge for his hat every whatever if he hits these certain targets, because that's really what those fast food places do really well, is create these kind of ultimately meaningless things, because in the world you get so stuck in the world of Domino's that you're like, I am a champion pizza maker, I can make a Supreme in 8 seconds, and that means something to you. And then you go, you're going out into the real world and people are like, it's not a thing, man. You can't take that one. You can't pay your mortgage with that badge. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny because you use a word like champion or ace or,
5-star,
whatever word you might attach to it, that is absolutely meaningless outside of Domino's. But within Domino's, that makes you feel like you're a pro, you're a professional, you're a manager or whatever it might be.
It's almost like the military, right? Like, and it's not the same, and I don't want to compare the two because, one's like pineapple and pepperoni and one's life and death. But I think Domino's have kind of taken a lot of that from the military and gone, if you want to climb in the ranks, and then eventually who is I guess higher up the ranks than you because they've got a silver hat, or the brim on their hat's a different color, or they've got their stars on their shoulder or stripes on their shoulder. So I just worry and believe that as we move further into an internet-based world, people are less and less concerned about that, and as business owners, we need to find ways to motivate people that aren't so much 5 stars on the shoulder and a more a 5-star mental health support program or whatever it might be that fits your business. Because I think it's it's too transparent now, right? Like I talked about with real estate agents before. Like, the world knows ultimately in 10 years someone will have come up with an app an eBay for house sales, and then it will be done. I still believe realestate.com's primed to just fire all the real estate agents and just own the whole market, and so you just list your own house. But I think if culturally you go into a blog or Glassdoor or whatever, and people are going to talk about how I worked for Jim's Mowing and I climbed to the top of the straight edge cutting Legend League, it might not mean as much as if they said I worked at Jim's Mowing and I was really struggling with some stuff at home, and the mental health support package that they had as part of my employment gave me someone to talk to, and it actually brought me out the other side of what was a very dark time. And so I think that the culture's changed a bit. I guess if we try to drag it back to what might benefit your listeners around creating non-money based, because it still has to be money related, but non-money based retention programs.
Well, what I've talked to people about before, and this will probably make sense to you when talking about your businesses and how you pay your employees and how you retain your employees, but within this industry, you do have an award that you can refer to. So I'm just trying to look that award up as we speak, and that award breaks
for your award or my award
through to level 5. Oh, this is for mine. So they break it down into level 1 through to level 5. So I've sat down with employees and gone, you know what, I want to pay you the most amount possible, but you've got to achieve this level of skill and prove that you can do that. And they've worked really hard to achieve it, get the highest pay rate, and then they slack off.
We've seen that a lot in the landscape industry lately, where they've negotiated up and then they've tried to, like, they've upped the pay and reduced the condition, the work.
Yeah, so it's the Gardening and Landscaping Services Award 2020 is the one that I've got to go off.
Yep.
So you can start as an introductory level. You can go level 1 through to level 5. So a level 1 is after you've reached probation, right? And you're at that base rate of going, I can be told what to do. I'll go out there and I'll do it under supervision. Level 5 is where you've done an apprenticeship or a traineeship. You're fully qualified with a letter after your name, not necessarily a letter after your name, but you get the idea. Fully qualified, and I can go out there, do the job unsupervised, and I can supervise somebody else. And so that's what I look at now is go, okay, you are getting classified when you work for me. And my current employee, we've had this conversation. This is the level that you're classified at, and this is the pay structure that we're putting you under. And there's still room to negotiate around the pay structure. This is the base award rate for that level. This is what we'll agree on. But these are your roles and expectations.
I think that there's the government created levels and what they work out to financially, and then there's the real world business requirement levels and what they work out to financially. And the reality is that the business related ones just have to exceed the government ones, because you can't underpay people. But the numbers you're looking at on that award are probably from 23 to 27, and the real world numbers are probably 27 to 36, right? And
I'll see if I can find them and tell you, because I think they are somewhere close to what you're saying, but I think they're slightly higher than that. And a lot of people are going to be on a casual rate, particularly when they start, but most people are going to be on a casual rate rather than a permanent rate too. Yep. So it makes a big difference there.
We've seen it a lot. And obviously my client base is heavily landscapers, but they probably fall under the same award that you're referring to. And to put in a Seek ad above award rate pay means absolutely nothing in this industry at the moment, because just to get someone to come and meet with you, you're almost $8 above what the award rate is, because the market is so buoyant at the moment that the award rate doesn't mean shit. Well, not to the employees, it does to the government.
Here we go. So after the introductory level, because that's probation, doesn't mean much. Level 1 is $23.23 an hour. Level 5 is $27.01 per hour. That's for permanent, and then you got your loadings if you're casual.
Yeah, so 25% or whatever for casual.
Yeah, I think if I go back and double check that the rates have changed year after year. So they're a little bit higher than that now, and I think the level 5 is closer to $30 or just over $30 an hour now.
Yeah, but what's the reality that you're paying someone with that skill set $30 an hour these days? Like, it's just not a thing. It's really someone that can be left on site. So a site in the landscaping industry, that's a site supervisor. If those guys are getting paid less than 34 or 36 in South Australia, I'll be very surprised. Doesn't mean they're worth it, but it's what I guess it does mean they're worth it, because if someone's willing to pay it, it's like saying that house isn't worth $1 million. If someone's given someone $1 million for it, the market's just told you that it's worth $1 million. I just think that there is going to be some...
The numbers you're talking match what I'm working with.
Yeah, and I think that we're, like I've said 10 times already today, we're due for a reset of some sort. It doesn't mean we're going to go back down to $23 an hour. I just think that there'll be less money moving around, which means that if there was 100 landscape supervisors on $40 an hour, there might be 70, and the 30 least talented ones of those, and the people that are going to get hurt the most are the ones at the bottom, because everyone's going to push down, and then guys that are working for maybe not. I think the labourers will be safe because they'll always need them. The guys in the middle, the ones that are level 2, 3, and 4, that have maybe snuck into a level 5 position, will get pushed down, and there won't be enough work for all of those people. So, yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice for staff at the moment is make sure that the leader that you have chosen is a leader that can weather a storm, and that when the tide goes out and the boats start getting the touch on the sand, the guy that's the captain of the ship that you're on is a good navigator. Because even for me, I've been in business for 16 years. We haven't really seen anything that dramatic. We've seen the drought in 06, 07, the global financial crisis did nothing in Adelaide. Like it was a blip on the radar. And I think we haven't had I hope we don't have a depression like the Great Depression. And I really don't. If we did, it wouldn't surprise me with what's going on in the world. But I just think that a correction's coming. And I've been saying it for long enough that people are like, well, if you say it for 20 years, eventually you're going to be right. But I just feel like we're that close. And I think that as an employee, two things. I wouldn't be going and signing a new home loan or a new car loan based on your current financial situation. And I would also be very conscious to be choosing a leader that is a wartime general, and that if we go into a depression, and who these people are, because the wartime generals are the ones that didn't fire their staff when all the COVID bullshit went down. We saw a heap of it here where everyone, the leaders of businesses, I won't name people because it's rude, but people, the world knows, right? They're the ones that had 15 employees, and they said, you are all stood down, and they got in their $120,000 car and drove to their $1 million shack on the river and waited COVID out. The leaders that you want are the ones that said, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm staying here and fighting. We're going to keep the places open. I'm going to keep paying your wages. We're going to do hybrids of work. Mowing's a different thing, but we're going to do the best we can, and I'll keep paying you your annual leave entitlements until there's no money left, and I will go down with the ship. They're the leaders that you want to be working with, and they're the ones that I think if you're jumping from a $38 an hour wartime general to a $40 an hour peacetime general, then you're making a very big mistake.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that what we're looking at in the future is a case of, no, we can't predict it, but the economy certainly hasn't in our lifetime, hasn't gone to that level of my parents or grandparents struggling coming out of World War I, World War II. So, there's certainly a lot of room for a reset, and the economy can't. Sorry?
Everything has cycles, right? What do they say? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. That's what the crypto people talk about. You see patterns, and it happens, and it's just unrealistic to expect that an economy that's been so buoyant for so long will just be remain, because anyone that was born after I was 82, around then, they haven't seen anything bad,
Yeah.
Maybe even 70.
That's right.
Vietnam. There's been nothing.
Well, I would say even
recently.
Yeah, after you were born, I know when my parents bought a house in New South Wales here, interest rates were spiking up around to 20%, 17 to 20%, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And you know what?
And we think we're hard done by when we hit 7.
Oh, yeah.
Efficiency is the thing that rules a business and the decisions you make as a small business owner. Right Mowers give you the options in their product lineup to match efficiency with size, fuel usage, and the type of jobs you want to target, from catching to mulching or side discharge, from roadside verges to acreages and manicured lawns to 6 feet tall and super long. I've been using the Right Stander I 42-inch with a Catch Pro for manicured areas and the Stander ZK61 to maximise productivity for large open acreage mowing. If you need to replace your push mower, try the 32-inch Stander B. If you have more open access to residential properties, there's a 42 through to 48-inch option that suits you. And if you want to enter the acreage market, the 52, 61 and 72-inch machines have choices in engine size and model type to suit the work you want it to do. Right Standards go the distance, saving you time and money, season after season.
Yes, my headphones went flat, so we're going to go raw dog it. See how we go.
That sounds good. Always up for a raw dog.
I probably should have planned it a bit better.
We're in the dungeon. Everything's good.
No rules.
So, talking about the award again, the award has those 5 different levels, and I've pushed people to think about this from different perspectives because I think a lot of this, particularly when you're going from I just want to run a business for lifestyle and for my happiness quota to I think I've got more work out there and that might net me more money if I can manage employees. The mindset is the number one thing to get over. So scarcity mindset we've mentioned a couple of times, but mindset of am I just out there on the tools or am I out there being a manager, being a HR person, being the CEO, all the 10 different roles that you assume when you have employees, not just working on your own. Yep. And so the way I'm looking at this, and I've pushed people really hard on this and gone, if you're the employer, the HR team, offer people a sliding scale. And I get pushback on this one. You can do the same. Tell me I'm stupid for this. But I'd sit there with an employee and I say, you can go up and down this sliding scale. You can be level 5, but you don't own it. So if you're in a supervisory role, you're eligible for level 5. If you're not in a supervisory role, you're eligible for level 4.
Yep. I think it'll come down to every business. Every business is different, and you're going to find that there's owners that don't want to give anything away, and you're going to find that owners like me that acknowledge that the more you give, the more you get back, and that can be, emotional support, financial, all of that. I mean, even today, and I've got to be careful how I talk about it because obviously there's a lot of confidentiality, although the staff can talk about their wages now legally, which they weren't able to do a year ago. I'm thinking about what's the minimum level that people need to earn to live a life where when they're at home tonight, they're not thinking about like, do I have to find alternative employment or do I need a second job? Because they've got like there's the government, what the government considers minimum wage, and then there's probably what most people think they're worth. That's probably not even fair. And then there's this bit in the middle, which is what I'm going to call the real minimum wage. So if the minimum wage in South Australia is $47,000, I think the real minimum wage is maybe $55,000 or $60,000. So I'm looking at it and going, am I paying my staff that much? And the hard thing is some of them, actually, that's not fair. All of them are definitely worth it currently. But there are times when you've had people that aren't. You're like, I don't know. But
yeah,
I've got a friend of mine who runs a landscape construction business who has individual agreements with his staff where none of them get paid double time and time and a half as overtime. They get paid a flat rate, and it might be $38 an hour or $42 an hour or whatever. And if they do 70 hours a week, that's all they get paid. And it still sits above the awards that we've talked about, but it creates an environment for them. If you want to earn more money, and this is the shitty thing about the Australian award system, is that you can't get too flexible with it unless you go way over it, because you have to make sure you still cover loading and annual leave and whatever else. But this system works really well because he goes, you want to earn $150,000 a year? That's fine. Bring me that value. And obviously, if you're a labor-based employer, the only way to bring me that value without, I don't know, inventing something new or upselling something that we make money on is to work more hours, right? Because we've worked out that we make this much per hour on you, and you make this much an hour. So if you want to work more hours, great, we'll pay you for them. I think there's your sliding scale and my vision of what would be a sliding scale in our business is a little bit different, but it's the same concept that let's put the burden on pay rises back in the hand of the employee, not the employer. So if you're an employee and you want to earn more money, here's a clear pathway for how to get from let's call it $25 to $35, and these are the things you need to do along the way. Because a lot of times it's hard for the employee to come up with that themselves. And I said it to you before, an employee should come to you and go, I want to earn $40 an hour. This is the thing that I'm doing, and this is the stuff that I have done for the last 12 months without asking for anything in return to show you that I'm worth it. I think the hard thing is for a lot of employees, they don't really understand how to have that conversation because of the lack of education around being an employee, being a business person, doing a personal budget, talking to a bank about loans. All that shit doesn't happen. And this, hopefully the content you're producing helps with that. So I'm thinking, as an employee, if we go back to as an employer, we go back to our employees and say, here's your sliding scale, the one you just talked about.
Yep.
If you meet these expectations, it's not even a conversation. We'll give you that. We'll give you that. We'll give you that. The challenge I have, it's allowed to go backwards, right?
Yeah.
Because it's never allowed to go backwards. You move someone's pay up because of the work that they're doing. Yeah. If they don't do that work and you try to move it back, and we've successfully done this one or two times with conversations with a staff member to say, look, we've moved you here. This didn't work. We're going to move you back. And then we've reduced the stress and the expectation on them. I don't think that happens much. I think that people almost have this like cliff that you move their money to a new number, everything behind it's gone, never to be talked about again, right?
Yeah.
But they're not bringing the same value. And so your sliding scale might include bonuses that are tied to success. And that's what a lot of sales businesses do. They'll give you the minimum to come to work and shower and put a T-shirt on.
Yep.
Then you'll get this much if you sell whatever. But I think people that are challenging you on that maybe have had bad experiences with it or are undereducated on how to deliver it well. I don't know. That might be unfair. But
I agree with what you've said there, that you can't go backwards. But at the same time, I think having a sliding scale allows you to do that in a way that's meaningful, right? So if you are an employee...
And you've communicated in front.
Yeah, definitely. If you're an employee, right, and you're going, all right, I'm being employed as a coal loader, then the coal loader gets $25 an hour. But suppose we don't have the machine operator this weekend. Can you be the machine operator for the weekend? But the machine operator rate is not coming to you when you're back on the coal loader job. You're back on the coal loader rate.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the same thing.
That's very binary, right? Like it's just you're in that one or you're in that one. The challenge is the things that we give people sliding scale pay rises for in a business like lawn mowing or whatever isn't always that clear cut. It's like so Domino's was a great example, right? You're a delivery driver, pizza maker today, you're on $15 an hour. If there's no leadership in the store, you're a shift runner, you've done the qualifications, you get an extra $2 an hour, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost a line on your pay slip. It's not that you've moved to a $17 an hour wage. You got $15 an hour for being a pizza maker and you got a $2 an hour bonus, which is kind of like first aid, fire ward, and all that stuff that happens. Yeah. There might be merit in that for your listeners to go, and I think there's just not enough of this like thinking outside the square and going, why do we have to do it this way? Like, what are the rules that we have to stick inside from the government standpoint? Let's plan this that suits our business the best without stepping outside of the rules. And maybe we pay $2 an hour when they're better, when they're faster, when they're more efficient, when they break less shit.
Yeah. Well, what I'm suggesting is that you've got certain markers that an employee needs to meet, right? Like if you're a new employee, you are on probation. There is no guarantee that your work will be there after probation. So once you get through probation, you get the tick, you're on as a casual or a permanent employee. So that puts you on level 1. And if you prove that you can work without supervision or with less supervision, you go to level 2. And by the time you get to level 3, that scale is roughly as high as you can go without having done an apprenticeship or being a team leader.
The hard part is the arbitrariness, if that's a word, of the level 1 to 2 to 3 when they go, but I can work without supervision. And you're like, no, you can't. You've really been a really challenging human for the last 2 months. We're going to slide you back to 1. Because then it's kind of like the 100-meter sprint versus synchronized swimming, right? One of them's got to you crossed the line at this time and you get the number. The other one's like, well, it's my opinion, and that's I think when we bring opinions into pay scale stuff, it gets a bit challenging. So,
well, I guess there's some things you can chuck in there, right? Like you can say, well, if you're qualified, then
yeah,
you get to go up the ladder a bit
and
further.
that's a 100-meter sprint, right? You've got the sign off from the government.
And once you're qualified, you are qualified. You don't lose the qualification.
No, well,
But suppose you're not working unsupervised. I'm going to have a conversation about the fact that I need to tell you what to do every day and supervise the work you're doing. I can't give you the full pay rate if I've got to sit there and hold your hand and wipe your bum.
yeah,
So, the conversation's not really about topping your pay rate. It's about saying, I don't have work for you if you can't work unsupervised. Whereas the leadership role, it should be clear cut. Like if you're a leader, you're a leader. If you're not in a supervisory role, then you're not getting paid that leadership $2 an hour.
yeah,
The manager role.
yeah. Which is fast food does it really well because it's almost like that you're in four walls, right? And so there's just one person in charge. And if they're not there, then you're that person. If there's no one in charge, you're just not opening.
Whereas so it's a loading on top of your pay rate, like you say.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit challenging. Like what you just articulated was great, right? And if you use that conversation in your business, great. I think the challenge that a lot of people in lawn mowing, contracting, landscaping, plastering, bricklaying, all the skilled trades that are an art before they're a science. None of them have been taught how to lead people. Well, not none of them, that's an unfair comment, but a lot of them haven't been taught how to be a manager. They're just a great practitioner. And so they decide that because they're a great practitioner that they should run their own business, but they don't know how to manage people. And, if they could take what you just said and deliver it well, great, but a lot of them can't. And I think that, short of having education around that, which is obviously what this podcast is part of, is improving the industry as a whole by uplifting the ability for them to communicate with their team members and for their team members to communicate back up to the owners and the bosses. You almost, if you can create more rules that are just binary, right? It either is or it isn't. It makes those conversations a lot easier to have because it's just a tick or a cross, and you're like, look, you've met this expectation, and I think that's why I love inventory-based businesses the most because it's a little bit arty, but it's very much science. Whereas with like mowing and contract landscape construction and that, there's so much art involved.
Oh yeah,
that it's hard to. And there's also the science. When I say science, the maths. You have to work out what to charge and all that. But when I sell something, right, like if this costs me $1 and I sell it for $2, we've made $1 and then all our costs come off that. With your lawn mowing world, you go, well, this should take about this long, and it just took longer, right? And it's either that the estimator screwed up or the person screwed up, or there's another variable, which is unlikely, but it's usually those two. One of them either took too long to do it, or they underestimated how long it takes to do it. I think that's a more challenging business.
Yeah, well, like what you're saying, I've sat down with the new employee, training them to do hedge trimming, and said this hedge is artwork. What you're doing here is you're getting paid to make this look pretty and to make it look like something. So you look at this hedge and you imagine that this is in human form. You are sculpting something that is in human form. You want to make it look like a human body part. And that's your goal. That's how we pay you, to make sure you do a good job of art.
And so who decides whether or not they did a good job or not, right? Because art is subjective, and you might come out and go, that looks shit. And then they go, well, I think this looks amazing, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, with hedging, you can kind of go, well, no, dude, you've actually minced it. But with art, like a painting, so
well, then you're judging whether that painting is abstract or whether it's meaningful in life, right? Because abstract's never meaningful.
With a hedge, the art is the value of the art is determined by the person paying your business to hedge it. And if they say, don't ever come back to my property ever again, then I guess that's the only opinion that matters.
Yeah, definitely. But in a business with employees, the balance is between the employer and the customer. The employer has a level of judgment on the employee. That are they doing a good job? And are they doing it in a speed which makes it feasible to keep them as an employee? And then, is the customer happy with that as well?
Yep. All
but
fair.
And another aspect of this, you touched on it, and I want to come back to it. idea of how I convey it to my employee really matters. And I sat down with my son, going back to the whole Domino's situation, and I talked to my son about using a scheduling app that allows me to track my employees. So that way I know my employee spent an hour on a job, I bill it to the customer for an hour. It also allows me to track whether the employee was actually there for an hour and where they went in between each job. And my son's like, you can't do that. You can't have tracking software that tells you whether the employee was sitting at the service station or at McDonald's for hours. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. What do you do when you're at Domino's? That's exactly what Domino's is doing. You love working there. It comes down to how I conveyed it to my son that it's all about tracking the employee or it's all about delivering to the customer.
Well, there's also an element of safety as well, which probably he hasn't taken into account. And Domino's is a vastly different business to what it was when I was there. But when I was a Domino's delivery driver, we were all carrying around floats of cash with $200. And, if we were not back in time and it was because we had been robbed, But I guess a dictator is always going to sell their tracking software with the benefits.
Yes.
A younger generation who challenges the status quo and tries to avoid the dictator style like trackability, but isn't uncomfortable with the fact that TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat all have all of that data, and he's probably on them, one of them 80% of the time that he's awake, amuses me. But if you don't want to, you don't want to get tracked, go get another job.
Well, right? And that's the way I saw it too. But the way I conveyed it to my son, he didn't think twice about the fact that Domino's is tracking him as a delivery driver. But he had a real issue with me tracking.
Like, does he have the app on his personal phone, or do they give him a phone when he's out delivering?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that to see.
And we've had this conversation with staff, and they're like, well, you can have the app. We had one staff member who was staunch against it, but I think he also thought that the government was in his bedroom watching him while he slept. So he was like, you're not putting an app on my phone. And we're like, that's fine. Here's a phone, right? Because then, the phone thing's a really challenging one because I don't know if you can force people to put an app on their phone for work, but I guess above that, if someone's going to be that difficult that they're just like, I'm not putting an app on my phone, then it's like maybe you're not going to get through probation.
I guess if you're putting it onto an existing employee, it's very different to saying, hey, I want to employ somebody who's willing to have this app on their phone.
Changed midstream, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I get that.
So, I look at it from that point of view going, well, this is part of the requirements of your job. You'll be coming on board with this expectation that we track what you're doing because that's how we deliver to the customer.
If you try to make changes to an existing business, if you roll it out well, it should be fine and everyone should be on board. And if you don't, then there's probably some more cultural issues with trust between, like we put security cameras in, we've got them in all our businesses, right? And we've got retail locations. There's no security cameras in there's none in this room. There's none in the toilets, obviously. But there's rooms where they're not there. Most of the time, the security cameras are in our car parks, above our counters, where the tills are, at each point of entry and that kind of thing. And I acknowledge that there'd be plenty of business owners that would sit there with a computer screen and watch their staff to see if they're working.
Yes.
We don't do that, right? Usually what will happen is I'll ring one of the guys and he doesn't answer and I'll look on the cameras to see if he's serving a customer or not to get an indication of whether or not I should try and go down a different avenue. Or I'll look on the cameras to see if we've got stock, if there's a pallet's been delivered or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like a gun, right? You can use a gun as a deterrent or you can use a gun as, it's probably not the best example, but
I think it's a great example.
The security cameras or the app on the phone, it's really going to come down to the person that's looking at the data. And if your employees don't have trust around what you're doing around the app on the phone, then there's probably bigger issues there and the relationship probably shouldn't exist. Like there's probably, like if they're worried about you, and I know they're not, but if they're worried about you watching them, then there's other issues that are probably happening that they're worried about that haven't come up yet, and it's probably worth having a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And that's certainly, it's it's the age-old thing, exactly what you're saying there. Are you using tracking to monitor your employees, or are you using tracking to look after their safety or to ensure that somebody else is not coming in and robbing you or whatever
Yeah.
the case may be? If it's apparent that you're using it because you don't trust your employees, then that's going to create a problem with the culture in the workplace.
And usually, from my experience, that issue is because the person, the employer or the owner, has trust issues in general because something has harmed them in
Yeah.
their life, in a relationship, or I guess as a child, and that's why they've got these trust issues. And I mean, if you've got the self-awareness to make a decision around that and go try and do some work on yourself to try and deal with those trust issues, then great. But in my experience, those business owners have a revolving door of employees who come in under the guise of it's a great business and we're going to pay you this much money, and then very quickly work out that they're watching them on cameras all the time and tracking them and asking them, all these questions, and it just kind of falls apart. And,
Let's go back to Macca's for a second, right? If you're running a Macca's franchise and you want your employees to do well, the franchise model has a system in place that says this is how long it takes to cook potato chips.
Yep.
Here's the timer. It's not about timing the employee to make sure the employee's not goofing off. It's about making sure that you're delivering to the customer.
100%. Yeah.
And so a system put in place like that by a good business owner, it's still going to come across as if the business owner is obsessing over details, micromanaging employees, all those sorts of things. If the employee is that way inclined, it's going to take a lot of work to set the culture expectation that this is a culture of performance rather than lacking trust.
I asked this question to one of my team members the other day. What is the difference between a mentor and a micromanager? Right?
Yeah.
Because I've had plenty of people that have worked underneath me directly who would consider me a mentor and would come to me to help them with everything from what margin to put on something to my partner and I are having trouble and who do I talk to?
Yeah.
Now, we've also had other employees where we've got the same relationship and they're like, if you're going to micromanage me, I'm going to go work somewhere else and you can stick it up your ass. And the difference is the relationship either between the two staff or the perception from the employee of the employer. And that could be a perception that's been created because the employer is a dickhead, or it could be because the employee is doing the wrong thing and they're calling it micromanaged when they're actually just being managed because they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. And again, if that's happening, a different conversation has to happen. And, I kind of look forward to because this is only realizations I'm having as I evolve as a leader, that I'm looking forward to the next time I have an employee question micromanagement in our walls, because I really want to dive into like what behaviors are happening that are causing you to think you're being micromanaged. Because ultimately, and this is a really hard one because the government would say this, right? Like, if you're not doing anything wrong, then, what's the problem with us listening to your conversations? And there's a privacy thing there. Yeah. And it's easy for a business owner to go, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care if there's cameras out here? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's a privacy thing there and people don't want to feel like they're being watched. So I don't think anyone's got the perfect solution to that yet with tracking on apps and obviously cameras and all that. But I think that the answer to all of that comes down to the relationship between you and the employer, the employee-employer relationship. And if the relationship's good and honest and pure and supportive, there's less concern about apps on phones and cameras and all that because they see that the importance of it from a business standpoint.
I've got two great examples here, and I'm affirming exactly what you're saying. I think you're spot on with knowing the relationship between you and your employee. So talked about two people today with other people outside of this podcast recording, and one example was a person who feels like they are a victim in every situation. And it's like, if you employ that person, then chances are, if you've got a camera or you've got tracking software or you point out that they need to improve something on the job, automatically they're going to play into that victim role. And it doesn't matter how good of a boss you are, they're going to fall into that role no matter what. And the other one is obviously the situation of your camera on the till. It's like, well, if they took money out of the till, and it's not that you had the camera there to prove that they were taking money out of the till, it's to prove when somebody breaks in with an armed robbery. But it found who the real crook was in that situation regardless.
A lot of our till camera work is actually error related. Like, someone brought something back and we put the wrong thing through the computer. The till's not out. Like, it's very rare. Rare to almost never has happened. I don't remember it ever happening where we've had people stealing from us, and I've been in businesses where it has happened.
Yeah.
It's never that. You know, the crazy thing, a lot of our cameras are actually above packing benches where we pack irrigation orders, because irrigation orders are so complicated that we'll regularly have landscape contractors who are dealing with more than just an irrigation supply. They're in a muddy paddock. They've got staff that haven't rocked up, excavators that have just ripped up NBN cables, and then an irrigation delivery gets there and they're rummaging through a box trying to find shit. And they're like, "You're idiots. You stuffed our water up again. You haven't delivered the right shit."
Yeah.
So our cameras are actually so we can clip a video of the thing going on the ute and go, "It's in this box." But anyway, I think, and look, with the example, I do need to wrap up in 2 minutes. I've got to get home.
Yes.
But the example that you talked about with the person that might have what did you say? What was the term?
Victim mentality.
A victim mentality. So one of the things that we do, and I don't advertise it, and I guess I'm sharing it because I think it's something that will become part of the good culture companies, is that we have a mental health support person that we work with, who she's on a retainer now with us. So I see her once a month, I guess, just to manage any unreconciled or undiagnosed trauma that I've been through in my life, be it childhood or business stuff that you kind of just try to drown in alcohol or whatever. Depends on what your poison is, right?
Yeah.
And then, so we have her on a retainer now because I think that there's a commercial reality that all businesses are going to have an employee that has something going on. And it could be victim mentality. It could be genuine trauma from situations. You know, I've got employees that have come from workplaces where they've had abusive bosses, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's like, I guess your kids are different, but you take a lot of relationships, warts and all, and an employee-employer relationship has to be a two-way thing. And I think an employee brings a lot of value to a business, and obviously, you know, helps the business generate an income if you've structured it properly, which is obviously part of the whole conversation that we've just had. And so I see it as the responsibility of employees, especially if you want to be employers, if you want to be a good employer, to have some form of support in place for the people that are maybe struggling with shit. And so we've had maybe 8 or 10 of our team over the last 5 or 7 years, maybe 5 years, go through and do breakthroughs with this mental health support worker. And, you know, it doesn't always work, right? Some people's trauma is really, really deep. And some people actually, I guess, aren't ready to reconcile the trauma and I guess make it part of who they are. You know, and I think for me, I've been, I guess, not struggling with alcohol addiction, but alcohol addiction's been a big part of my life for my 15 plus, since I was 15 probably. And it was something that I identified as, I guess it's probably best that I talk from my standpoint than the team members. So the lady that I deal with, Tony, she was like, and she didn't say this because they've got to be really careful not to suggest things, but it got to a point where I worked out that my identity was the guy that could go out and just get drunk with clients and close deals, and I was the party animal, and I'd always be there. We're having drinks, we're having drinks. And until I was ready to change my identity, that was never going to repair. And I think that, you know, if we have that available to the staff, because I think that there are some messed up units that are just bad people, but deep down, I think that all humans have this this goodness in them. Sometimes we just have to peel back a few layers, and I think sometimes I can get caught up in just seeing the good in everyone, and all of a sudden we've just got this kind of like lost puppy kind of business where everyone's kind of like, you know, struggling with something. But ultimately, if you can peel those layers back and help those people repair or at least somehow reconcile the trauma that they're dealing with, you'll find loyalty that you've never had before. And, you know, the moat around your employee castle, which is really what a lot of what we talked about today, become so wide and so deep that no one's going to come in and offer them $2 more an hour to leave, because they're like, you got no idea how important being part of this business is, and the support that I've had. It's not about money, right? Like this person, I went through a divorce, and the support that I got from the business changed my life. Or I moved here from, I don't know, another part of the world, and I had no friends, and they've introduced me to people and supported me, and helped me navigate the local rules. All that kind of shit matters, and I think that it's not. It just takes a bit of effort, and I think that if businesses want to be employers of choice moving into the next decades, that's going to be a part of it. And I don't think it's big so that you can post a photo on LinkedIn and say, are you okay today? And I do understand that has an important role. Yeah. I think it needs to be part of the fabric of the business that we're making sure that people are okay every day. And I'm not perfect at it. Like I get busy and,
Yeah. But look, I think it's awesome that you've gone to that length to recognize that you benefit as a person by doing that, but that also your employees benefit when you offer that service as well. That's great. And I know you're got to finish up now. I wanted to finish up with
basketball training, so I have to go look after the other two crazy kids, and my wife gets to relax and watch my oldest.
Yep. I want to finish up with one point if you got time for it. It'll take a second. The thing I've seen recently come up is a job role which two different people went into basically the same job role. One of them was told, this is your job role. You're in a situation where you're dealing with people that you can't predict what's going to happen. And then along the way, got accused of inappropriate behavior in the workplace. So they got warned, you're being investigated, stand down while you get investigated. That was a massive shock to him. He couldn't deal with it. Another person was told, hey, this is the job you're applying for. You are going to get investigated at some point in time because you're going to get accused. And the person was like, yep, I know what to expect. I'm happy to take the job on and expect the accusations to fly. It makes a massive difference if your boss sits down with you in the interview of the job even, or in the process of onboarding and say, expect these things to happen. Not all of them are going to be pleasant. If you get pointed out that, when you break a window or you cut an electrical cord with a hedge trimmer or whatever else happens, we're going to have a conversation about this. It's going to be a hard conversation, but it's part of the job, and this is how we make sure that you and I are both on the same page and we have a good understanding. Then that makes a world of difference as an employer-employee relationship.
That, what you just said, is not just an employee-employer relationship. It's an everything relationship. It's a father-son relationship. It's a husband-wife relationship. It's a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. There is not enough communication occurring at all levels around expectations. And, I've been married, we've been together nearly 20 years. We've been married, what year are we in now? Like 14 years.
Yeah, congratulations.
You get guilty of it, right? Like you kind of just expect that even though we know each other intimately, you expect that the other person knew what you meant, right?
That's it.
That's not fair, right? And what you've said is perfect. And I think that one of the biggest weaknesses I had early as an employee was that I didn't articulate what I wanted from a new employee in their probation period and didn't provide a regular enough feedback. And we did this really well recently. We had someone that didn't finish their probation with us, and they knew on their 6th month, they said, I get it. I've already started thinking about possible career changes because this isn't working. Like they already knew because we had been so good with that communication. And I think your example is perfect.
Yeah.
Clint, over communicate and then there's no ambiguity.
Clint, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on. I feel like I'm getting to know you more as a person, and I respect your time and the fact that you've come on here and you've been able to help my listeners with a lot of these difficult questions.
I met someone at the golf last week and he asked if I'd be on his podcast, and I was like, mate, I'll do this every day. I love it, and I love talking about business and I guess improvements and that kind of thing. So, mate, if you want to do something again in 2 months, 3 months, whatever works, let me know.
Yeah. Well, the next one I've got coming up, Joel Barnett's asked me to join him. So, Joel.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell him I'm coming for him. He'll know what it means.
Will do. Hey, go and enjoy some time with your family. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. Have a good night.
All right. Just stay on the line for me.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.